The hangar was freezing at dawn, metal walls doing nothing to keep out the desert cold that would become brutal heat by noon. Specialist Lisa Torres wiped grease from her hands and stepped back to admire her work on the Apache helicopter. 18 hours straight she'd been troubleshooting the targeting system, tracing problems through miles of wiring until she found the failure point everyone else had missed. The bird would fly perfectly now. She always made sure of that. Before we continue with Lisa's incredible journey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Drop your country name below and let's see how global our community really is. What happens to this young mechanic will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you need to hear this story. Hey Torres, you done playing with tools yet? The voice belonged to Captain Derek Mitchell, one of the Apache pilots who treated mechanics like they were invisible servants. He stood with 3 other pilots, all of them wearing their flight suits like badges of superiority. Some of us have actual important work to do, flying missions, combat operations. Real military work, not just turning wrenches. Lisa had heard variations of this speech 100 times in her 3 years as an aviation mechanic. The pilots rarely learned mechanics' names, rarely acknowledged the skill required to keep their multi-million-dollar machines operational. To them, she was just a mechanic, someone who existed to serve their needs and disappear when not required. She nodded politely as she always did and went back to her work. What they didn't know was that Lisa had grown up in a family of pilots. Her father had flown Apaches, her uncle had been a test pilot, and she'd been around helicopters since before she could walk. She joined the Army planning to fly, had scored top marks in every aptitude test, had the instincts and reflexes that made great pilots legendary. But budget cuts had reduced flight school slots, and her slot had been reassigned. So she'd become a mechanic instead, figuring she'd work her way back to flying eventually. Except eventually kept getting postponed. Years passed. She became the best mechanic in the unit, the one who could diagnose problems by sound alone, who understood these machines at a level that bordered on supernatural. Pilots specifically requested her to work on their birds because they knew if Torres certified it, it would perform flawlessly. But respect and acknowledgement were different things. She remained invisible, just a mechanic in their eyes. The crisis hit on a Tuesday morning. Intelligence reported enemy forces massing for an attack on a forward operating base with 200 soldiers. Command needed Apache support immediately, but a sandstorm the night before had damaged half the fleet. Lisa and her team had worked miracles getting 4 birds operational. 4 birds, but only 3 pilots available. Captain Mitchell was grounded with the flu. The mission needed 4 helicopters or it wouldn't work. The base commander, Colonel Sarah Reeves, stood in the hangar looking at the operational Apaches with frustration carved into her face. "We're 1 pilot short. We'll have to scrub the mission or go in undermanned." The other pilots shook their heads. Going in with 3 birds against the enemy concentration would be suicide. But scrubbing meant 200 soldiers would face the attack without air support. "I can fly it," Lisa's voice cut through the discussion. Everyone turned to stare at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Colonel Reeves frowned. "Specialist Torres, I appreciate the offer, but this isn't the time for jokes. We need qualified Apache pilots." Lisa met her commander's eyes steadily. "I'm qualified, ma'am. I have my rotary wing license, completed civilian Apache certification 2 years ago on my own time and money. I've logged over 300 hours in simulators. I know every system on that bird better than anyone in this hangar. Now, if you're on the edge of your seat wondering what happens next, hit that like button right now. Show some support for this incredible moment. 1 click, 1 second. Let's get this to 10,000 likes and prove that talent can come from anywhere." The pilots erupted in protests. A mechanic flying combat missions? Impossible, ridiculous, but Colonel Reeves held up her hand for silence. She'd commanded long enough to recognize competence when she heard it, and something in Lisa's voice told her this wasn't bravado. "You're telling me you can fly an Apache in combat conditions with no military flight training?" Lisa shook her head. "I'm telling you I've been training myself for 3 years because I knew I was meant to fly. I've studied every mission brief, watched every after-action review, learned from every pilot who talked to me. I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm saying I can do the job that needs doing." Colonel Reeves made her decision. "Gear up, you're flying." The other pilots tried to object, but Reeves shut them down with a look that had ended arguments with generals. Lisa suited up with hands that didn't shake despite her racing heart. This was it, Everything she'd worked for, trained for, dreamed about. One chance to prove she belonged in the sky. The flight to the combat zone took 40 minutes. Lisa flew in formation with the other 3 Apaches, her movements smooth and confident. The other pilots watched her skeptically at first, then with growing surprise. She handled the bird like she'd been born in the cockpit, compensating for wind shear, maintaining perfect position. Her responses to radio calls crisp and professional. Then they hit the combat zone and everything became real. Enemy fire erupted from multiple positions. The Apache team split into their assault pattern, engaging targets with precision strikes while protecting the ground forces. Lisa's targeting was flawless, her flying instinctive, her tactical decisions exactly what the situation required. She identified enemy positions the other pilots had missed, coordinated fire support that broke the enemy assault, and flew through conditions that had veteran pilots white-knuckled. When one of the other Apaches took damage and had to emergency land, Lisa provided cover fire that kept the enemy back until rescue arrived. She expended her ammunition protecting her fellow pilot, then continued flying top cover without weapons, using her presence and maneuvering to keep enemy heads down. It was flying that pushed the Apache to its limits, and Lisa made it look effortless. They returned to base 3 hours later. The mission was a complete success, enemy forces routed, friendly casualties minimal. As Lisa climbed out of the cockpit, she found the entire hangar crew waiting, but so was someone else. Vice Admiral James Richardson stood in his service dress uniform, having flown in specifically to observe the after-action briefing for what intelligence had called a critical operation. Colonel Reeves approached with Lisa's flight data and combat footage. The Admiral watched in silence, his experienced eyes taking in every detail of Lisa's performance. When the review finished, he turned to face the assembled pilots and crew. In 35 years of military service, I have observed thousands of pilots in combat conditions. What I just witnessed from Specialist Torres is the finest display of Apache piloting I have ever seen. Not just technically proficient, though her flying was textbook perfect, but tactically brilliant, instinctively aggressive when needed and cautious when appropriate, and most importantly, absolutely fearless in protecting her fellow soldiers. He looked directly at Lisa. Specialist Torres, I am personally authorizing your immediate transfer to flight school with a full scholarship, and upon completion, I am requesting you for an advanced tactical aviation unit that could use someone with your unique combination of skills. He paused, then added, also, effective immediately, you are promoted to warrant officer. Welcome to the pilot community. You've earned it 100 times over. The hangar erupted in applause. Even the pilots who'd mocked her were clapping, their skepticism transformed into genuine respect. Captain Mitchell, recovered from his flu and watching from the side, approached Lisa with an extended hand. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. A big one. I never should have assumed your value was limited to mechanics work. You're not just a mechanic. You're a pilot who happened to be working on helicopters instead of flying them. I'm sorry I was too blind to see it. Lisa shook his hand, gracious in victory because she understood something important. This wasn't about proving people wrong or getting revenge for dismissive treatment. This was about getting the chance to do what she was born to do, to use her skills where they mattered most. The years as a mechanic hadn't been wasted. They'd given her knowledge that made her a better pilot, understanding of the machines that other pilots couldn't match. 6 months later, Lisa graduated top of her flight school class. She went on to fly missions that would remain classified for decades, earning decorations and the quiet respect of the special operations community. But she never forgot where she came from. She made a point of learning every mechanic's name, of acknowledging the crucial work they did, of treating them as the skilled professionals they were. Years after that defining mission, young mechanics would approach her at aviation conferences, telling her that her story had inspired them to pursue pilot training, to refuse to let others define their limits. Lisa always told them the same thing: your current job doesn't define your potential. Your dedication, your skills, and your willingness to prepare for opportunities before they arrive, that's what defines you. Be so good they can't ignore you, and when your moment comes, be ready to fly. This story is about more than one person's journey from mechanic to pilot. It's about the potential that exists in people who others overlook, about the importance of preparing for opportunities before they arrive, about refusing to let others' limited vision become your own ceiling. Lisa spent years being dismissed as just a mechanic, while quietly becoming one of the most skilled pilots no one knew about. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that your current position doesn't define your future potential, I need you to subscribe to this channel right now. We share powerful stories like this every week, stories about people who refuse to be limited by others' expectations, who prepare in silence and perform when it matters. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of people who believe in the power of persistence and preparation. Share this with someone who's working quietly toward their dreams. Someone who needs to remember that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you can have. Comment below and tell me about your own journey, about times you were underestimated, or about someone who inspired you to aim higher. We're building a community that celebrates the people who prove their worth through actions, not words, who prepare for their moment with such dedication that when opportunity arrives, they're ready to soar. Thank you for being here, for believing in stories that matter, for understanding that greatness often begins in unexpected places. Remember, you're not defined by what others see. You're defined by what you're becoming. Keep working, keep preparing, and when your moment comes, fly.